Good afternoon and welcome to this Emeritus Professorial Lecture Series. This series honors our distinguished emeritus professors as they transition to the next phase of their careers. And today it's my pleasure to be here to honor Erika Schoenberger, an emeritus professor of environmental health and engineering, which at Johns Hopkins is a cross-divisional department that combines the strengths of the Whiting School of Engineering and the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Erika's research has focused on why we do what we do and how that affects our environment. And in particular, her work has explored social power, its political, economic, and ideologic structures, and the choices we make based on these constructs. In her book, Nature, Choice, and Social Power, Erika challenges conventional wisdom and shows how power, the power of individuals, the power of classes, and the power of markets, has been critical to setting us on a path to environmental degradation. She also suggests and challenges ideas about what we need to do now to understand our responsibility to the environment and to each other. Today, you'll hear Erika talk about why we make the choices we make. She'll discuss how and why we often make choices that are not in our own best interests, and why we do that to ourselves. And she might even encourage you to consider making different choices. Erika is a respected educator and colleague, and the Whiting School has greatly benefited from her achievements. As she begins the next phase of her career, we wish her well on her next endeavors, including a new book, as I understand it, on the origins of capitalism. And with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce John Boland, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering at the Whiting School and the Bloomberg School of Public Health. John.
Thanks, Dean Schlesinger. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very happy on any occasion to have an opportunity to honor Erika's career at Johns Hopkins. This is one, hope there'll be others. And also, we have the opportunity today to answer some questions about Erika. For example, there's a question that has bothered a long succession of deans. What is Erika doing in a department full of environmental engineers and scientists? You've heard this. So we might touch on that. You may recall that the Department of Geography and Environmental Engineering, which was the relevant department for most of Erika's career, was born out of physical geography, environmental engineering, and environmental science, to which were added a little later, David Harvey came, we had radical geography, mathematical modeling, economics, environmental policy. The story goes that many years ago, when Rez Woolman was the chairman of the Department of Geography and Environmental Engineering, he was having a conversation with the dean, probably about the budget, the then dean, and the dean is said to have commented, Rez, the problem is you're not running a department, you're trying to run a 12-person university. And the department was certainly diverse, not quite the 12-person or even 18-person university that Reds may have aspired to. But with that mindset, when a faculty slot became available and there was a candidate that had degrees in history and regional planning and strong interest in sociology and anthropology, we couldn't resist. So that's how Erika ended up in the Department of Geography and Environmental Engineering. At least that's my recollection. What happened? Did I bump something?
It's your presence.
You better take that. I can't be trusted with that particularly. Thank you. So how is this all supposed to work together? This very diverse department with this range of disciplines in it. You might expect, if you think about it, that they would quickly gravitate into little groups of faculty and a few students doing the same thing, another little group of people doing their thing, ignoring each other, all of these little islands of scholarship in the department. And that sort of happened, but it's only partly true. That's because, while pushing ahead with their studies and research, students were constantly exposed in their offices, in the hallways, in the lunchroom, in seminars, after hours, to colleagues, thinking about different problems, working in different paradigms, and often with completely different worldviews. Inevitably, ideas were exchanged among students. Faculty members such as Erica contributed to this process, this ferment, in their teaching and in their mentoring, and helped to build bridges across disciplines and help students to get comfortable with all these things going on around them. The result in many cases was graduates who first of all became leaders in their own fields, yet still had the ability to communicate and collaborate with experts in related fields. We have one of those graduates here today. Professor Melissa Wright has devoted her career to the study of the social justice movements, primarily in northern Mexico. Her studies draw together politics, culture, and economic issues. She's published extensively in 2 languages. The topics mentioned in her list of publications are fairly colorful. Things like femicide, forced disappearances, narco-politics, and last but not least, the border wall. These are things that she deals with. And I should mention that Professor Wright chose this field long before people in this country figured out that the conditions in northern Mexico have a major impact on security for our country and these days for politics in our country. She was well ahead with that. So it's my privilege today to introduce Professor Melissa Wright from the Department of Geography and the Department of Women's, Genders, and Sexuality Studies at Penn State University. Professor Wright.
Thank you, John.
It is a privilege to be here to honor Erica, Dr. Schoenberger. It's also a real pleasure to come back to Hopkins. I haven't been here in some time. And I'm very moved to be here. So I have some notes because this will keep me on task. Dr. Schoenberger received her BA in history from Stanford University in 1974, and then from Berkeley and University of California, Berkeley, her Master of City Planning in 1979, and then her PhD in City and Regional Planning from the University of California, Berkeley in 1984. In that same year, she joined the Johns Hopkins faculty as a newly minted PhD and assistant professor in the then Department of Geography and Environmental Engineering. Since 1989, she has also held a joint appointment in the Department of Anthropology. Among her many honors, she was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2020 and has received grants from the National Science Foundation, the Spencer Foundation, the Army Research Laboratories. She has presented some of the most eminent lectures in the discipline of geography, including the Ripke Lecture in Economic Geography, the Guest of the Chair Lecture in the Royal Geographic Society and Institute of British Geographers meeting, and the Progress in Human Geography Lecture. These lectures also have publications with them. Dr. Schoenberger is a much-loved teacher, advisor, and mentor in her departments and across this campus. She was then, and I know she is now. And she has used her expertise to help on a number of social and economic justice campaigns, such as the Living Wage in Baltimore, and has served on the Advisory Council for Sweatshop Watch, among other things. She has published 2 monographs, one in 1997, The Cultural Crisis of the Firm, which was awarded a Book of the Year prize by the Society for the Study of Social Problems, and in 2015, Nature, Choice, and Social Power. She has authored and co-authored over 6 peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapters across the fields of geography, environmental policy, political economy and economic history, science and technology studies, and cultural anthropology. Throughout this impressive body of work, she tackles the big questions. What do we mean by competitiveness in market economies? How do discourses, the stories that we tell about modern economics and the origins of markets, shape our material practices as researchers and our ways of thinking more broadly? In other words, really thinking about epistemology. How can we understand, another question, how can we understand the contemporary urgencies of environmental degradation through the lenses of history and economic geography? And another, in her own words, why do humans fail to act in our own interest when it comes to the environment, despite knowing what ought to be done? This latter and pressing question is a central concern in her current book project, Money, Monks, and Monarchs, The Origins of the Market Economy. Here, she dives into the intersection of environmental history and capitalism to shake up some conventional stories about how money and urban markets get started. As a conventional version of this story goes, capitalism evolved organically with the emergence of markets and towns and the circulation of money as a necessary means for easing exchange by demolishing a less flexible and overly provincial barter system. Phooey, says Erica. Barter was working very well for many people, most people, and had proven to be extremely flexible ever since someone thought to trade a skein of wool for a peck of apples. Through her impressive grasp of an enormous historical and, geographical literature, Erica shows that money-based economies evolve instead through feudal processes of military conquest and the related state-building tasks of territorial and resource control. In short, financial and urban markets develop not only to facilitate exchange per se, but also to facilitate the mobilization of territorial resources and their management across space and time. As she has put it in her words, this need to manage resources geographically and temporally contributes not only to the spread of commodity markets, but also to the development of markets in land and in labor, end of quote. With careful historical analysis and her characteristic elegant storytelling, Erica explains that as a result, cities and indeed much of the social and economic landscape of the emerging modern era are created in the image of finance capitalism. It's not the other way around. Among many contributions here, she seeks to uproot the ideas of tautologies that link capitalism with inevitabilities, be they social and/or ecological. In other words, she argues that historical determinism is not driving the choices that people are making, the environmental destruction, and other social issues related to any particular political economic system, be it capitalism or others. Rather, she asks us to consider how specific actors, those who are guiding global capitalist processes, financial markets, major corporations, neoliberal institutions, economic institutions, and educational institutions, and the production of epistemology, the ways that we come to know things. How does the way that we come to know things drive the ways that we do things? These are the questions that she grapples with. And how these actors and those in charge of many of these institutions make and have made very consequential decisions at particular moments in time, which have had monumental impacts. For it is people, she constantly reminds us, rather than any particular system or institution in and of itself. It is people who are in charge of powerful institutions, economic, political institutions, and corporations, and who are making decisions in spite of having excellent knowledge and information. Despite having this information, they're making decisions to destroy the planet, or decisions that not to destroy the planet, decisions resulting in destruction to planetary health. If we, as she asks us to do with her, re-examine the historical geographies of global capitalism and its devastating environmental legacy, perhaps we can find some ways to make better decisions without demanding that we, or younger generations in particular, must overthrow the world order in order to save the planet. She doesn't take this position because she is a cheerleader for capitalism. Hardly. It's simply that waging global revolution and uprooting the entangled infrastructure of transnational capital is a large undertaking, and it's a lot to ask of young people who would be the ones tasked with the project. Instead, she asks, can we use the knowledge we have about the past and its connection to the present to shape more environmentally responsible decisions? Could we, she has asked, have a market or create a market economy that actually serves the interests of the large mass of people and that does not wreck the environment while doing so? As you can see, while Erica is embracing her new position as Professor Emerita, she is very much in her scholarly prime as she tackles these urgent matters of our times and those really confronting future and younger generations. Before turning the podium over to Erica, I want to say a few words about the enormous pleasure, the gift, really, that it has been to have had Erica as my teacher, my mentor, my friend for over 30 years, since I was in my mid-20s when I came to Hopkins in 1991. As many of you here know, Erica fortunately understands that she has a responsibility to present her daunting intelligence gently to her students. It's a lot to get into a scholarly conversation with Erica. She knows a lot of things. She reads very, very widely, and wildly too, probably. And yet she is eminently approachable, inviting, and generous. And she achieves this with a keen deployment of the sharpest wit I have ever known, and excellent baking skills, baked flan being her specialty. She still, to this day, sets out a bag of chocolate chip cookies when I leave her home. I saw them in your kitchen today. When I first met Erica in 1991, and she invited me to work, to apply to work with her here, and then, of course, with David Harvey, who's here, and Red Zwolman, in the Department of Geography and Environmental Engineering, I knew then that I was being offered the opportunity of a lifetime. That's quite a lineup. And I was not a fool. I applied, even though I found her incredibly intimidating, so I felt very brave. And I will always remember the day that I received my acceptance. I knew then that I was, to use Erica's words for me, a lucky duckling. In fact, her email to me yesterday began duckling. Through countless conversations, many baked flans, many walks with our dogs in the parks, much reading, much writing, and some arguments and debates, and also much laughter, I learned from the warmest and the funniest and most generous teacher I could ever hope to meet. Thank you, Erica. And now I invite everyone to join me in welcoming Professor Emerita Erica Schoenberger to the podium.
It was a lucky day that I met Melissa. Actually, I am the lucky duck. And as you can tell, she brought a lot of joy and scary research. She would go down to Juarez. John mentioned femicide. Think about what that means. So she's kind of cruising the streets, trying to figure out why all these women are dying, as she is a woman. Okay, so thank you for coming, everyone. I really appreciate it. I want to start out by talking to my engineering colleagues a little bit. My father was an engineer, and he taught me to use a slide rule. And my 5th grade science project was comparing ramjets and turbine engines. And when he was teaching me to drive, I took a curve really too fast and slammed on the brakes. And I could sort of see out of the corner of my eyes, he's grabbed hold of the dashboard and he says in a kind of strangled yelp, "Rick," he always called me Rick, "Rick, when you go around a curve, delta V equals 0. And I'm like, what on earth? I don't even know if the physics is right, but it was just such a strange thing to say. And I believe in that moment, I understood how engineers panic. And I'm imagining further that, like astronauts, Houston, we have a problem. We're all about to die. But down on the ground in Houston, I'm thinking of a mob of engineers all waving their slide rules at each other and shouting formulas. And the astronauts are lucky they made it down. So this is all by way of saying that I didn't find it strange to be in an engineering school. I have the impression sometimes that the engineering school found it strange to have me, but I really liked living with engineers. You learn a lot. I'm very interested in how things are done. And so I got a lot that my colleagues in geography and other social sciences and humanities, I saw you, Scott, don't get. And it's really made a difference to my work, actually. And has been really interesting and fun. So I'm not going to really give a lecture. I'm just going to talk a bit about various things. And one of them is kind of my mission here in the engineering school. I discovered early on that the engineers really want to go out and do good things in the world and make the world a better place. And I also discovered that they are as naive as ducklings. And so it became my mission to help them become engineers who really understood the world they were working in a more richer and more a way that's more sensitive to how power is amassed in society, how resources are gathered up. Engineering obviously is saturated in the social. There would be no engineering problems without us. And we are the ones who refuse to do what the engineers say. So you ought to be interested in why that is. And the engineering students sort of seem to believe that the world is operating okay, and they just need to fix this, and everything will be okay. And so it's my mission for both undergraduates and graduate students here to help them snap out of that happy frame of mind. And so, one of the things that I did was develop the Engineering for Sustainable Development minor, which was about all kinds of sustainability, not just environmental. It had a big focus on resource-poor countries in the global south, as we call it nowadays. And students from every single engineering department took that class. And also, so did people from public health and anthropology and other departments. And so when we did interdisciplinary teams, it was super interdisciplinary. And the engineers had to learn how to talk to non-engineers, and the non-engineers had to learn how to understand what engineers were going on about. And so I feel like that was a real good thing. I am particularly proud of that part of my tenure here. So the engineering school gave me a lot. I also gave it a lot. And I'm glad that that worked out. Oops, wrong way. So as both John and Melissa mentioned, I came into this very funny, strange department of geography and environmental engineering, which was invented by Red Swolman, who is the gentleman in the bow tie on the left. And he thought that engineers and social scientists should live together because we had a lot to teach each other. And that worked very well for me. And he was a joyful person. He loved the work that he did. He was always fascinated by what other people did. And he created, in this weirdo department where people were coming from very different directions, a kind of collegiality that you would give your right hand for. I mean, it was just a wonderful place to be, very supportive. And in particular, Reds, because he was Reds, he was also very funny, which I appreciate. Really didn't put limits on you. He really encouraged you to follow your instincts. I won't say follow your passion because as it happens, my passion is chocolate chip ice cream and probably wouldn't have worked out that well professionally. But to follow what you thought was important to do at any particular time. And it was a very freeing kind of place. I want to justify myself by saying in those days, it was 10 years to tenure. It was not until you were a full professor. So you lived under crushing anxiety for much longer than you wimps now have to do. And luckily I had David Harvey to help me through that, who is like the most famous urban geographer Marxist on the planet and has been for quite some time. And I can hear my engineering colleagues say, oh, thank God we had an urban geographer Marxist on the faculty, even if he left us. And I know that that means a lot to you all, the engineers. But what I do want to say is that David was also an unusual mentor with a kind of mean streak. So he used to tell me things every so often as I was freaking out. You know, if you don't get tenure here, you'll probably end up in an okay place. Or he would list the people who didn't get tenure here and then went on to become incredibly famous and leaders in their disciplines. So that was a big help. But he was also, when I was writing my first book, I was writing the most important chapter, the pivotal chapter, the thing that was really gonna take care of everything. And I was just doing a terrible job. And I thought, okay, I can write through this. And I'd write more and more, and it was not getting better. It was kind of getting worse and worse. And I finally have like 60 pages. I know it's wrong. I don't know why. I don't know where it went wrong. I take it to David and say, please save me. And he leafs through like the first 5 pages quite casually. And then he says, oh, there's your problem. And he was right, of course. 60 pages out the window. I could, go up to that very moment and sort of rethink how I was going to get out of the hole that I had dug for myself. So that was great. And I loved them. And I was a lucky duck to land here, big time. Okay, so aside from teaching and hanging out with my colleagues and students, I wanted to mention that there was a lot of stuff going on when we were teaching here, David and I. One of them was the divestment campaign for against South Africa at the time. And people with very long memories may remember that a bunch of students, undergraduates and graduates, built a shanty town on the Lower Quad, and a couple of frat boys set fire to one of the shanties, including one that had our students in it. So that was an exciting moment. We were very involved in the living wage campaign at Hopkins. People may not have realized that Hopkins itself had this wholly owned subsidiary, the Dome Corporation, which owned Broadway Services, which is where we hired our security guards and other kind of basic staff, and didn't pay them enough to live on. So we had this big campaign, which went on for a couple of years, actually. It was really a hard-fought battle. It was probably the one that was most embedded in the Baltimore community, because we were working with Baltimoreans United in Leadership Development, which is strongly connected to the Black churches in Baltimore. And we finally prevailed. I say we as though I was, at the center of attention, but I am representing here. I'm ventriloquizing for a group of really strong and terrific faculty and students. And then most recently has been, of course, the whole armed sworn police force, which we didn't win on, but again, and one of the great things about being at Hopkins is that in the course of the usual crushing service burden and the teaching and committee work and whatnot, fighting these fights has also been a remarkably great experience working with the students and my faculty colleagues. So that was good. So here's my path. The cultural crisis of the firm was about why the people who run very big, technologically progressive corporations don't manage to make good strategic decisions. And in a way, it boils down to they didn't want to because they didn't see themselves in the new strategic direction. And so they almost fell off a cliff, although eventually they managed to get back on track. But that was the sort of first round of why don't people act in their own best interests, even when they know what they ought to do, because they really did know. Yeah, I'll tell one story. So Xerox Corporation, was this fabulously successful company that had invented the Xerox machine. They took their name from the machine. Actually, people think it went the other way. And they were the first company ever to hit $1 billion in sales in 10 years. And they brought out more and more and bigger Xerox machines that could do two-sided copying and color and collate and actually staple the collated stuff. And then the Japanese started coming out with these little machines. In Japan, you couldn't really, they're short on space. You couldn't have a copying machine that needed its own room. And so they had developed these small machines, which were selling like hotcakes. And Xerox knew about it because they had a joint venture, Fuji Xerox, which was where the small machine was invented. And their joint venture in England had started selling the Fuji machines because the Europeans also aren't that space rich. And so they were selling like hotcakes also in Europe. And so they bring this machine to the guys in Rochester, and it's literally on the table, okay? And they're saying, look, this is, killing you, and we know how to do this. And the Xerox guys just, like it was not a Xerox machine. It did not look like what they thought a copier machine should look like. And they also didn't really take the Japanese that seriously as competitors, like what do they know? And so they almost tanked, really. And they're still, not so brilliant. So that was that. And Nature, Choice, and Social Power, not one of the most felicitous book titles. I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. But that was where I was trying to get at why we don't behave in the environment, even when we know perfectly well what to do, what needs to be done, why we're making such a mess. And we know that we better start fixing it pretty darn soon. So that was the focus of that book. And now the one that hasn't got a publisher yet is Money, Monks, and Monarchs, as Melissa said. So, so let me talk a little bit about the internal combustion engine. Because, of course, that's the one that triumphed over all other possible automobile engines. And, that's fine with me. The internal combustion engine was really, really good for some uses and some users. You wouldn't want to have an electric vehicle on a battlefield or in the, farm lands. So there's no reason why it shouldn't be there, but why it swept everything else off the table is a pretty good question. Electric cars were perfectly, they had many positive attributes and many good uses and users. So in fact, let's see, I think, yes, electric cars. So one of the issues with a gas engine is that you have to crank it. And if you try to think about cranking in high heels and a corset, you can see one reason why women didn't like them. And, since women didn't get the vote until 1920, I'm thinking maybe their husbands, kind of overrode their preferences and bought the gas engine because it goes bloop, 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 right? But you'll be pleased to know that Henry Ford bought his wife in 1908, the same year that the Model T came out. He bought his wife an electric car. So he didn't have a particular grudge against them. But there are a couple of reasons why the electric car went south. And one of them is, and this was a big discovery for me, I had no idea, is that although the country was becoming electrified, it was only a very partial thing. So most households were not connected to the electric grid, that I understood, but almost all of them were only wired for lighting. So this photograph is from the Disney World exhibition from GE. It's a great big beautiful tomorrow. And it's the first electrified one of their carousel. And you can see possibly that every single appliance is plugged into the overhead lights. So you couldn't do power stuff in your home, forget hybrids. So you were, the electric industry was not ready for the electric vehicle. And then it is the case that Ford figured out something really monumental about how to make cars. When he started out, people made cars by hand, and it took hundreds and hundreds of hours for them to build a car. And it was a very rarefied market. You sold to rich people and who cared about the costs. And he sort of figured out that if you could build a car that was pretty good quality for $500, that would create a whole new market for itself. And he was right. But then you have to build the car to meet the $500 price. And he had some very clear design principles. He was always going for lighter. That helped you on the power end. Simpler, he would just strip stuff out of the cars that other people were building. Didn't always make for easy driving. So he designed to manufacture, but he didn't care how hard it was to drive. And actually, it was kind of a nightmare to drive a Model T. But one of the parts about it that I really loved is that in order to fill the gas tank, you had to get down off the car, remove the front seat, stick a wand of some sort into the gas tank to find out how much was there and how much you needed to put in, add the gas, replace the front seat, and then you could go on your way. And you think, why would you do that? And the reason is because then you don't need a pump to move the gas. So simpler, lighter, easier to assemble, and a total pain in the neck for the driver. But the car costs $500. And the other thing about Ford was that he was kind of a maniac about precision and speed. And so he had the best, they designed their own machine tools. They were the best in the business. Some guy from Mercedes-Benz came over and was shocked and wrote back to his masters at home that Ford had the best machine tools of anybody he'd ever seen. And so that's how you get down to the $500 price for a car that is actually quite decent, although horrible to drive. And then, of course, everybody knows about the moving assembly line. And the before picture is the cars are being built by hand. And you start with a chassis, and people walk from job position to job position, and they do their special thing, and you don't know how long it takes. And they sort of do it at their own pace, and you could get a very beautiful Bugatti out of that, but it's not going to help you out if you're making a Model T. And so he just reorganized the entire production process. Simple, fast, and cheap, and yet with reasonable quality. And so this is what he gets. Mind you that in August 1913, when it took him 12.5 hours to make a car, he was already hugely ahead of everybody else in the business. He was fast enough that somebody writing for an auto magazine said, you really have to use a moving picture camera in order to figure out, in order to understand what's going on here. So 12.5 hours to build a car in August of 1913, already stupendous. In December, with the moving assembly line, he's got it down to 2 hours and 38 minutes. And a month later, he's got it down to 1.5 hours. So that's how you get a $500 car that actually works. And he was right about the market. Millions and millions and millions of people bought it. The rich end of the market was by itself, but in the poor end of the market, the Model T and maybe 1 or 2 other producers had quality cars that wouldn't break, at the first curve, as your father's screaming Delta V. And so the net on that is that he had 90% of the cheap car market, which was the big market. And what strikes me about that is, here's the choice. Did you choose a gasoline engine? In what sense did you choose it? If gas engine, I mean, if there were no other engines available, did you want to buy, oh, there's, yeah, huge green line production output, blue line declining costs. But the question for me is, did all those people, you know, we kind of say, oh, all those people bought gasoline engines, what were they thinking of? They weren't buying an engine, they were buying the car. And so it mattered that Ford designed his car around a gasoline engine. And you can see that this is the power of the market at work. He created a market, he owned it, and we have lived with that ever since. Not to say that the electric should have triumphed, but it would have been great if there had been, you know, everybody's second car had been an electric, if Amazon had already had electric vans. And it raises the question of what do you do to get out of the fix we're in? And it seems to me evident that it will take a huge collective investment to turn the tide on this, because there is so much built in that happened through the market and through certain kinds of state interventions like subsidizing the oil industry. But we got ourselves into this pickle. It's going to take an immense collective effort to get us out of it. And so then the problem is, how do you get this immense collective effort? I think when I finished writing this book, I was a whisker more optimistic than perhaps I am now. But that's the kind of stuff that I wanted to figure out, is like, how did we really get here? And what does that mean for how we go forward? So that's kind of what I was trying to do. I don't really know if it mattered, you know, in the larger scheme of things, but being here with my colleagues and students, that was a great privilege and a great lot of fun, and I'm grateful for it. So I think that's it. That's all I want to say. Now there's, yes.
Gave me some things I need to say. All right. Thank you, Erica, for that inspiring talk. And thank you for the other speakers. And thank you for all the guests who are here today to celebrate and honor Erica's amazing career. And I would like to say just that I met Erica mainly through the courses that she was teaching, and several people have said, you know, what an amazing educator and instructor she is. And I saw that in play during her sustainability class. And you had, I forget the occasion, but you would have posters and they would present their work. And the ideas were just amazing, particularly in a very short time. And I know that the students were inspired by Erica to create these amazing products. They were actually solving real world problems, coming up with real world solutions. And it gave you hope, you know, that there will be people to solve these kind of challenges, hopefully. So we want to congratulate you on your retirement, and thank you for the many, many contributions that you've made, both to the department, the university, students, faculty, and the whole group. And we're very fortunate that when you decide to come here, that you were brave enough to consider joining an engineering department, because I'm sure at that point in time that took a leap of faith to think about that would be the right place. But you did it remarkably well there, and you brought perspective and dimension to the group that I think persist, and we thank you for that. And I would like to present you with the small token of our appreciation for your many contributions, for your stellar career. So if you'd like to join me, I'd like to present you with this. Good.
Okay, thank you, Martha.
Service for you, and like to congratulate Erica again on her retirement. And personally, I'm hoping that in your next chapter that you continue to be the champion for these causes, for doing the right thing. And we look forward to hearing your voice in many more publications, as well as books, and returning here to inspire us. So congratulations, and please join me in congratulating Erica on her tremendous career and her successes, and wishing her the best in the future. So I think now we can retire to the back of the room here and have some nice refreshments to enjoy speaking with Erica and colleagues.